The garage smelled like sawdust and disappointment at 2 a.m. I was sanding a cabinet door when their voices drifted through the thin walls, my wife Tessa and our 17-year-old daughter Emma arguing in the kitchen. Nothing unusual there. What stopped my hand on the sandpaper was hearing my own name followed by words that made my chest tighten. "Mom, you can't just pretend he doesn't exist," Emma was saying. "Watch me," Tessa replied, her voice sharp as broken glass. Everyone knows what's happening except him. It's embarrassing. But what if he finds out? He won't. Your father's too busy playing with his little wood projects to notice anything real. I set down the sandpaper and moved closer to the wall. 23 years of marriage, and she still thought I was stupid. Maybe I was. Maybe I'd been stupid for a very long time. "Besides," Tessa continued, "after Saturday, it won't matter anymore. Julian says we can make the announcement official." Julian, my brother-in-law, married to Tessa's older sister Nessa for 15 years. "Uncle Julian's really going through with it?" Emma asked. "He's been planning this for months. Your Aunt Nessa will survive. She always does." The cabinet door slipped from my hands and clattered to the concrete floor. By the time I picked it up, their voices had moved upstairs. I stood there in the silence, surrounded by half-finished furniture and the wreckage of assumptions I'd carried for years. Saturday. What was Saturday? The next morning, Tessa left early for her architecture firm like always. She'd been working longer hours since her promotion to senior partner 6 months ago. At least, that's what she told me. I'd stopped asking questions when her answers became shorter and her smiles became rarer. I was loading lumber into my truck when I remembered her gym bag sitting by the front door. Tessa had joined an expensive fitness club downtown, another sign of her rising status in the world. She'd forgotten the bag in her rush to leave. Being a good husband, I decided to drop it off at her office. The bag was heavier than expected. When I lifted it, something rattled inside, something that didn't sound like workout clothes. I unzipped the main compartment and found the usual items: designer athletic wear, water bottle, protein bars. But tucked into a side pocket was something that made me pause. An invitation, expensive cardstock, embossed lettering. Celebrating New Beginnings, Saturday, October 14th, 7 p.m. The Halva residence below that, in Nessa's careful handwriting, for Tessa and her bright future. My name had been written in pencil at the bottom, then erased so thoroughly that only faint impressions remained. I stared at that invitation for a long time, sitting in my truck outside Tessa's office building. 23 years of marriage, and I wasn't invited to celebrate my wife's new beginnings. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built half the custom cabinets in that building, including the ones in Tessa's corner office. My hands had shaped the wood that surrounded her success, but apparently, I wasn't worthy of celebrating it. The gym bag had another surprise: a second phone, tucked beneath the false bottom that expensive bags sometimes have. Not Tessa's regular iPhone, but a cheap Android with a cracked screen. The kind of phone someone buys when they don't want certain conversations traced back to them. The phone was locked, but Tessa had never been creative with passwords. She used Emma's birthday for everything. The screen lit up, revealing 6 months of text messages between my wife and someone listed as J. The messages started innocent enough. Work complaints, family gossip, shared frustrations about spouses who didn't understand their ambitions. But they progressed quickly into territory that made my hands shake as I scrolled. "Can't wait for Thursday," one message read. "Your wife's book club gives us 3 hours." "The lake house this weekend?" another asked. I told her I was going fishing. But it was the most recent exchange that made everything clear. J. "Saturday night, we make it official. I'm done pretending." Tessa. "What about Nessa?" J. "She'll survive. She always does. Besides, you're the sister I should have married." Tessa. "And Cole?" J. "What about him? Guy's so clueless he probably thinks we're planning a surprise party for him." I sat in that parking lot for an hour, reading through months of messages. They detailed every lie, every excuse, every moment when I'd believed my wife was working late, or visiting her sister, or attending some professional development seminar. The messages revealed a systematic deception that would have impressed me if it hadn't been destroying my life. Julian Kepler, my brother-in-law, the successful lawyer who'd married into Tessa's family money and spent 15 years acting like he'd done them all a favor, the man who'd given the toast at our wedding, who'd been Emma's godfather, who'd borrowed my tools and never returned them, the man who was planning to announce his affair with my wife at a party I wasn't invited to. I drove home in a daze, the secret phone burning like a coal in my jacket pocket. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Every family photo on the walls seemed to mock me. Every piece of furniture I'd built by hand suddenly felt like evidence of my own stupidity. That evening, Tessa came home with Chinese takeout and a story about a difficult client. She kissed my cheek like she had for 23 years, asked about my day like she cared, and complained about her sister's upcoming party, like it was an obligation she dreaded. "Nessa's throwing another one of her elaborate dinner parties," she said, picking at her lomine. "You know how she gets. Everything has to be perfect." "Sounds like fun," I replied, watching her face for any sign of guilt. "When is it?" "Saturday night, but don't worry, you don't have to come. It's just family and her work friends. You'd be bored." "I might surprise you," I said. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or calculation. "Cole, really, it's not your kind of thing. Besides, don't you have that cabinet project to finish?" She was right about the cabinets. I had 3 custom pieces due Monday for a client who'd already paid half up front. But suddenly, finishing those cabinets seemed less important than attending a party I wasn't invited to. "Maybe I'll work on them Sunday instead." Tessa's smile became strained. "Honey, trust me. You'll have more fun here. I'll bring you back some of Nessa's famous chocolate cake." That night, after Tessa fell asleep, I took the secret phone to my garage and read through the messages again. There were photos, too, pictures I won't describe, but that left no doubt about the physical nature of their relationship. Pictures taken in a bedroom I recognized as belonging to Julian's lake house, the one he'd inherited from his grandfather. But it was the written messages that hurt the most. Not just the planning and the lies, but the casual cruelty with which they discussed me. "He actually asked if I wanted help with the yard work," one message read. "Like I'd want his help with anything." "At least he keeps busy with his little hobby," Julian had replied. "Easier than having him pay attention." "Sometimes I wonder what I was thinking when I married him," Tessa wrote. "I was young and stupid, I guess." "You were settling," Julian replied. "We both were, but we don't have to anymore." I set the phone down and looked around my garage. My little hobby had paid for half of everything we owned. The custom woodworking business I'd built from nothing had funded Tessa's architecture degree, our daughter's private school tuition, and the down payment on the house where my wife was planning her escape. But maybe Julian was right. Maybe she had been settling. Maybe they both had. The question was, what was I going to do about it? I spent the next 3 days planning. Not revenge, not yet, but reconnaissance. I needed to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with before I decided how to respond. Thursday afternoon, I followed Tessa to her work meeting. She drove straight to the Riverside Motel, a place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Julian's silver BMW was already in the parking lot. I sat in my truck and waited. They emerged 2 hours later, Julian straightening his tie, Tessa checking her reflection in her phone camera. They kissed goodbye like lovers, not like a man and his sister-in-law. I followed Julian home and watched him greet Nessa with the same casual peck on the cheek he'd given her for years. Watched him help her carry groceries, ask about her day, play the role of devoted husband with practiced ease. Then I followed Tessa home and watched her perform the same charade with me. Friday night, I made my decision. "You know what? I told Tessa over dinner. I think I will come to Nessa's party tomorrow. She nearly choked on her wine. What? The party. I changed my mind. It might be nice to get out, see everyone. Cole, I told you, it's really not… Not what? Not my kind of people? Not my social class? I kept my voice light, but something in my tone made her pause. I helped build half the houses in Nessa's neighborhood. I think I can handle a dinner party. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? She studied my face, looking for signs of suspicion. I gave her my best confused husband expression, the one she'd grown used to over the years. Fine, she said finally, but don't embarrass me. Wouldn't dream of it. That night, I drove to the electronics store and rented a projector. A good one, with high resolution and bright output. The kind they used for business presentations. I told the clerk I needed it for a family slideshow, which, in a way, was exactly what I planned to use it for. Saturday morning, I installed a camera in our bedroom. Not the nanny cam Tessa had demanded we remove when Emma turned 16. Something smaller, more sophisticated. The kind of device that could stream directly to a laptop and record everything in high definition. I positioned it carefully, testing angles until I had a clear view of the bed. Then I sent Tessa a text from my regular phone. Running errands, back this afternoon. Love you. She replied immediately. Love you too. See you tonight. An hour later, Julian's BMW pulled into our driveway. I watched the live feed from my laptop, parked 3 blocks away. Watched my wife of 23 years welcome my brother-in-law into our bedroom. Watched them desecrate the bed where Emma had been conceived, where we'd held each other through her nightmares and my mother's final illness. The camera captured everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment of casual cruelty as they mocked me between their moments of passion. He's so clueless, Tessa laughed at one point. I could probably bring you to the company Christmas party and he wouldn't suspect anything. After tonight, it won't matter, Julian replied. Nessa will handle the divorce paperwork. She's good at cleaning up messes. What about Emma? She'll adjust. Kids always do. Besides, she'll be better off with a real father figure. I stopped the recording there. I'd seen enough. The Halver house sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn in the most expensive neighborhood in town. Nessa had inherited it from their grandmother, along with enough money to maintain the lifestyle their family considered appropriate. It was the kind of place where people went to see and be seen, where every dinner party was a performance and every conversation was a transaction. I'd been there dozens of times over the years, usually carrying tools or delivering furniture. The hired help entrance, Nessa called it, though she always said it with a smile that was supposed to make the insult sting less. Tonight, I walked through the front door. The party was already in full swing. 30 or 40 people filled the main rooms, all of them dressed in the kind of casual elegance that cost more than my monthly income. Lawyers, architects, real estate developers, the professional class that ran our small city from behind mahogany desks and over expensive lunches. Conversations died as I entered. Not because I looked out of place, I'd worn my best suit and newest boots, but because everyone knew I wasn't supposed to be there. Tessa appeared at my elbow within seconds, her smile bright and sharp as a blade. Cole, what a surprise, I thought you were working tonight. Finished early, I replied, kissing her cheek. Didn't want to miss the celebration. How wonderful, Nessa said, gliding over with Julian beside her. My brother-in-law looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face had gone pale, and his usual confident smile seemed forced. Cole, so good of you to join us. Wouldn't miss it for the world, I said, shaking Julian's hand and holding it just a moment longer than necessary. Beautiful party, Nessa. You always know how to bring people together. I carried a laptop bag, the kind I used for client presentations. Several people glanced at it curiously, but no one asked questions. In their world, everyone carried laptops to social events. Business never stopped, even during celebrations. Can I get you a drink? Julian asked, his voice carefully controlled. I'm good, thanks. Actually, I brought something to share with everyone. I hefted the laptop bag. A little presentation I've been working on. Tessa's smile flickered. Cole, this isn't really the time. Oh, I think it's perfect timing. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of people who'd known me for years, but had never really seen me. After all, we're celebrating new beginnings, right? I thought everyone should know exactly what we're beginning. The room had gone quiet. Even the catering staff had stopped moving, sensing drama in the air like animals sensing a storm. Cole, Nessa said carefully, perhaps we could discuss this privately. No need for privacy, I replied, setting my bag on the coffee table and unzipping it. We're all family here, aren't we? The projector was small but powerful. I'd practiced setting it up until I could do it in under 2 minutes. The laptop connected wirelessly, and within moments, I had a clear image projected onto Nessa's pristine white living room wall. What are you doing? Tessa demanded, but her voice had lost its edge. She sounded scared. Sharing some home movies, I said, clicking to the first video file. I thought everyone might enjoy seeing what Tessa and Julian have been up to during their private meetings. The image that filled the wall was crystal clear, high-definition video of my bedroom, time-stamped from that very afternoon. Julian and Tessa, caught in a moment that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. The room erupted, gasps, shocked murmurs, the sound of someone dropping a wine glass. But I wasn't watching the crowd. I was watching Nessa's face as she realized what she was seeing, her husband, her sister, in another woman's bed, planning the destruction of 2 marriages. Turn it off, Julian shouted, lunging toward the laptop. But I'd positioned myself between him and the equipment, and 3 of the other guests instinctively moved to restrain him. Why? I asked mildly. This is your celebration, isn't it? Your new beginning? The audio was the worst part. Not the sounds of their physical betrayal, but their voices afterward, casual and cruel as they discussed their plans. Nessa will never see it coming, Tessa's recorded voice said. She trusts me completely. And Cole's too stupid to figure it out, Julian replied. We could probably do this for years without him noticing. After tonight, we won't have to hide anymore. I'm tired of pretending to love him. I paused the video and looked around the room. 40 faces stared back at me, a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and fascination. This was the kind of scandal that would fuel gossip for years. But wait, I said, reaching into my bag again. There's more. The folders were thick with documentation. Bank statements showing transfers from accounts Julian shared with Nessa into private accounts he shared with Tessa. Hotel receipts from dozens of meetings over the past 6 months. Credit card statements showing purchases of jewelry and clothing that had never made it home to Julian's wife. I distributed the folders like party favors, watching as people opened them and began to read. Watching as the full scope of the deception became clear. Julian's been using your inheritance to fund his affair, I told Nessa, who stood frozen in the center of her own living room. The lake house weekends, the business trips, even the jewelry Tessa's been wearing, it's all been paid for with your family's money. Nessa took the folder with shaking hands. Her face cycled through emotions, confusion, realization, rage, and finally, a cold fury that reminded me why her family had controlled this town for 3 generations. Get out, she said quietly. Nessa, let me explain, Julian started. Not you, she said, her voice cutting through the room like ice. Them, both of them, get out of my house. This is ridiculous, Tessa said, but her voice shook. Cole, you're making a scene. These people don't need to see… What? The truth? I closed the laptop, ending the projection. I think they've seen exactly what they needed to see. Julian made another move toward me, but this time I was ready. 20 years of physical labor had kept me in better shape than his gym membership and personal trainer. When he swung, I stepped aside and let his momentum carry him into the coffee table. Careful, I said as he picked himself up. You might hurt something important, like your reputation. The crowd was dispersing now, people making hasty excuses and heading for the door, but they'd take the story with them, and by morning, everyone in town would know what had happened at Nessa's party. I packed up my equipment while Tessa and Julian tried to explain themselves to a woman who'd stopped listening. Nessa had found the offshore account statements in her folder, accounts Julian had opened without her knowledge, funded with money that legally belonged to her. 20 years, she said, not to Julian, but to Tessa. 20 years I've supported you, defended you, helped you build your career, and this is how you repay me. It just happened, Tessa said weakly. We didn't plan it. 6 months of hotel receipts suggest otherwise, I said, shouldering my laptop bag. But don't worry, I'm sure you'll figure something out. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Julian? You might want to check your office voicemail. I took the liberty of sending copies of everything to your law firm's ethics committee. And Tessa? I'd start looking for a new place to live. I changed the locks this afternoon. The last thing I heard as I left was Nessa's voice, cold and final. I want them both out of my house. Now. Sunday morning brought the kind of silence that follows earthquakes. I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and reading the local news website, watching the story spread through our small city like wildfire. Prominent attorney's marriage scandal rocks local elite, read the headline. Someone at the party had leaked the story to the press, complete with enough details to make it clear this wasn't just gossip. By noon, 3 different news outlets had picked it up. My phone had been ringing since dawn, but I wasn't answering. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. The truth was already out there, spreading faster than I could have managed on my own. Emma came downstairs around 10, still in her pajamas, her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. Dad, she said quietly, is it true? What did your mother tell you? She's not here. Her car's gone, and all her clothes. Emma's voice trailed off. There's a suitcase by the front door, but it's not hers. I walked to the entryway and found the expensive leather suitcase I'd never seen before. The kind Julian might have bought for weekend trips to his lake house. A note was attached to the handle, written in Nessa's careful script. Since you were so eager to pack for your new life together, I thought I'd help. Don't come back to my house. Dad? Emma's voice was small, younger than her 17 years. What happens now? Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my lawyer's name, David Chen, a man I'd hired years ago to handle my business contracts, but who'd become something closer to a friend over time. Cole, he said without preamble. I've been getting calls all morning. We need to talk. About what? About the 3 different legal actions that are about to rain down on your head. Can you come in today? I looked at Emma, who was pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word. Give me an hour, I said. David's office occupied the 3rd floor of a building I'd helped renovate 5 years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd built the shelves that now held the legal books that might determine my future. Sit down, David said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk, and tell me exactly what you did last night. I walked him through the entire evening, from the projector setup to the document distribution to Julian's failed attempt to attack me. David took notes, occasionally stopping me to ask for clarification or additional details. The recording equipment, he said finally. Was it in your own home? My bedroom. My house. My name on the deed. Good. And the financial documents? All legally obtained. Bank statements from accounts my wife had access to, credit card bills that came to our shared address, hotel receipts I found in Julian's car when I detailed it for him last month. David raised an eyebrow. He asked you to detail his car? Family favor. I do automotive work sometimes, side income. He paid me $200 to clean his BMW inside and out. I smiled grimly. I'm very thorough. And you kept copies of everything you found? I'm a businessman, David. I keep records. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. Cole, I've known you for 8 years. You're one of the most methodical people I've ever met. But this... He gestured at his notes. This was surgical. How long have you been planning it? Since Thursday morning when I found the secret phone? 4 days. David shook his head. Most people would have confronted their spouse privately, maybe tried counseling. You orchestrated a public destruction that's going to follow them for years. Why? I thought about that question while David waited. Why hadn't I confronted Tessa privately? Why hadn't I tried to save our marriage, our family, our life together? Because, I said finally, they weren't planning to leave me. They were planning to destroy me. Slowly, carefully, systematically. They wanted me to be the fool, the cuckold, the pathetic husband everyone pitied. They wanted to take everything I'd built and make me grateful for whatever scraps they left behind. So you decided to strike first. I decided to level the playing field. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked back at me with something that might have been admiration. Julian Kepler just fired his divorce attorney, he said. Apparently, the ethics committee suspended him pending investigation, and Tessa's firm put her on administrative leave. That was fast. Small town, Cole. Reputation is everything, and theirs are now radioactive. David set down his phone. Which brings me to the legal issues you're about to face. Tessa's threatening to sue for invasion of privacy, emotional distress, and something called intentional infliction of marital harm. Can she do that? She can try. But given that everything you recorded happened in your own home, and everything you distributed was legally obtained, David shrugged. I think we can handle it. The bigger problem is Julian. What about him? He's claiming you assaulted him, says he has witnesses. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. He swung at me and missed. I stepped aside and let him fall into his own stupidity. If that's assault, then every dance floor in America is a crime scene. The witnesses agree with your version, David said. Apparently Julian's not very popular with Nessa's crowd right now. But he's also claiming you stole confidential financial information. From his wife's accounts? The accounts she had legal access to and shared with her sister? I shook my head. Julian's grasping at straws. Maybe, but straws can still cause problems. I'm going to file a preemptive motion, get ahead of this before it becomes a bigger mess. David's assistant knocked on the door, then entered with a stack of papers. The divorce petition from Mrs. Merrick, she said, setting the documents on David's desk. And this came by courier. The second envelope was heavier, more official. David opened it and scanned the contents, his expression growing grim. What is it? I asked. Restraining order. Tessa's claiming she fears for her safety. You're prohibited from contacting her directly, approaching her workplace, or going within 500 feet of any property where she's staying. Where is she staying? David checked the paperwork. It doesn't say. But given that Nessa threw her out, he shrugged. Hotel, maybe, or she found a friend willing to take her in. I thought about Tessa's friends, the tight circle of professional women who'd supported each other's careers and social ambitions. How many of them would still be willing to associate with a woman who'd betrayed her own sister? There's something else, David said, pulling out another document. Nessa Halvor wants to see you. Apparently, she has a proposition. What kind of proposition? She didn't say, but she's requested a meeting through legal channels, very formal, very proper. David looked at me curiously. What do you think she wants? I had a pretty good idea, but I kept it to myself. When does she want to meet? Tomorrow morning, her attorney's office, neutral ground. David handed me the meeting request. Cole, whatever she's offering, be careful. The Halvor family doesn't do anything without an agenda. Neither do I replied. That evening, I sat in my garage and tried to process what had happened. In less than 24 hours, I'd destroyed 2 marriages, ended 2 careers, and turned my own life upside down. The smart thing would be to feel guilty, to regret the nuclear option I'd chosen. Instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't pretending. I wasn't playing the role of the oblivious husband, the grateful blue-collar worker, the man who should be thankful for whatever attention his successful wife chose to give him. Emma found me there around 9, still holding a piece of sandpaper I'd forgotten I was holding. The garage smelled like sawdust and oil, the air cool against my forearms. I'd been standing at the workbench without realizing it, staring at a half-finished drawer I couldn't remember starting. The sandpaper had worn smooth in my grip, my thumb rubbing the same spot over and over like it was a worry stone. "Mom called," she said. "What did she want?" "To talk to you. I told her you weren't available." Emma sat on my workbench, swinging her legs like she used to when she was little. "She's staying at the Marriott downtown. She wants you to call her." The familiar motion hit me harder than I expected. For a second I could see her at 8, sneakers dangling, asking if she could help hold a board steady. Did she say anything else? She said this was all a big misunderstanding, that people are making it seem worse than it is. Emma looked at me with eyes that seemed older than her 17 years. "Is that true, Dad?" There was no accusation in her voice, just a quiet need for something solid to stand on. I set down the sandpaper and really looked at my daughter. When had she grown up? When had she stopped being the little girl who used to help me in the garage, handing me tools and asking endless questions about how things worked? Her face still had traces of that child, but the way she watched me now was different, careful, measuring, already braced for disappointment. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think Mom's been lying to both of us for a long time," she said quietly. "And I think Uncle Julian is a creep who never deserved Aunt Nessa." The words came out steady, practiced, like she'd already rehearsed them alone. "You knew?" Emma shrugged. "I suspected. Mom's been different this year. Happier, but not about us. About something else. And Uncle Julian." She made a face. "He's been weird around me lately. Like, inappropriate weird." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What do you mean, inappropriate?" I kept my voice level, but my hand tightened against the edge of the bench. Comments about how I'm growing up, how I look like Mom when she was young. Stuff that made me uncomfortable. Emma met my eyes. "I never said anything because I thought I was imagining it. But now you know you weren't." "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. "Dad? Are you going to be okay?" The question was almost casual, but her shoulders were tense, waiting. It was such a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything we'd both lost. Not just a marriage or a family structure, but the illusion of safety, the belief that the adults in our lives had everything under control. I felt that weight settle and then, surprisingly, ease. "I'm going to be fine," I said, and realized I meant it. "We both are." "What about college? I mean, with the divorce and everything." "Your college fund is in your name, Emma. Your mother can't touch it, and neither can Julian. You're going to college, just like we planned." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. 17 years old, and she was already learning that the people you trust most are capable of the deepest betrayals. I hated that lesson for her, hated how early it had come. "Emma," I said carefully, "if Julian ever made you uncomfortable, if he ever did anything that crossed a line—" "He didn't," she said quickly. "It was just creepy comments, weird looks, nothing physical. But if he had—" She looked at me for a long moment. "Then I would have told you, and you would have handled it." "Yes," I said. "I would have." The certainty in my own voice steadied both of us. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always been my refuge. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and legal maneuvers and the messy business of untangling a life I'd spent 23 years building. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. "Dad?" Emma said as she got up to leave. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For not letting them make you the fool." After she went inside, I picked up the secret phone I'd taken from Tessa's gym bag. There were dozens of new messages, increasingly frantic as the reality of their situation set in. The screen glowed harshly in the dim garage, lighting up names I already knew by heart. "Julian, we need to talk. This is getting out of hand." "Tessa, call me. We can fix this." "Julian, my lawyer says we might have grounds for a lawsuit, invasion of privacy, something like that." "Tessa, I'm at the Marriott, room 412. Please come. We need to figure this out together." "Julian, Nessa changed all the account passwords. I can't access anything." "Tessa, my firm is reviewing my position. 20 years of work, and they're reviewing my position because of one night." "Julian, one night? This has been going on for 6 months." "Tessa, you know what I meant." "Julian, do I? Because right now, I'm not sure I know anything about you." The messages continued, but I stopped reading. They were turning on each other, just like I'd hoped they would. Pressure had a way of revealing people's true character, and neither Julian nor Tessa was handling it well. Their words blurred together into noise, no longer worth my attention. I turned off the phone and locked it in my safe, evidence in case I needed it later. The click of the lock sounded final. Tomorrow, I would meet with Nessa and find out what the Halver family matriarch wanted from the man who'd destroyed her marriage but saved her from years of additional humiliation. Tonight, I would sleep better than I had in months. The thought surprised me, and then settled in like truth. Nessa's attorney had a corner office in the town's oldest law firm, the sort of place where partnerships were passed down and client ties lasted for generations. I'd never been inside before, though I had replaced the crown molding in their lobby 3 years earlier. Even then, I'd felt out of place among the leather-bound books and oil portraits of judges long gone. Walking in now, that old feeling returned, sharper for the stakes involved. David met me in the parking lot, carrying a briefcase and wearing his most serious expression. "Remember," he said as we walked toward the entrance, "don't agree to anything without running it by me first. The Halvers have been playing legal chess in this town since before either of us was born. I'll be careful. I mean it, Cole. Whatever Nessa's offering, there's going to be strings attached. There always are with her family." The conference room was designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, windows overlooking the town square, a table that could seat 16, but today held only 4 people. Nessa sat at the far end, flanked by 2 attorneys I didn't recognize. She looked older than she had on Saturday night, but also somehow more formidable. She watched us enter with calm, assessing eyes, already calculating moves ahead. "Cole," she said, rising as we entered. "Thank you for coming." "Mrs. Halvor," I replied, taking the seat David indicated. "Please call me Nessa. After everything that's happened, I think we can dispense with formalities." She gestured to the men beside her. "These are my attorneys, Mr. Patterson and Mr. Wells. They'll be handling my divorce proceedings." Patterson, the older of the two, opened a thick folder. "Mr. Merrick, our client has asked us to discuss a matter of mutual interest." "Which is?" "The complete and permanent destruction of Julian Kepler's legal career," Nessa said, her voice calm as if she were discussing the weather. "And your wife's professional reputation." David shifted beside me. "Mrs. Halvor, if you're asking my client to participate in some kind of conspiracy—" "Nothing illegal," she said quickly. "Nothing that could come back to harm Cole or his daughter. But Julian made a critical error when he decided to steal from my family." Wells, the younger attorney, pulled out a stack of documents. "We've been investigating your brother-in-law's financial activities. What we've found goes far beyond simple adultery." He spread the papers across the table. Bank statements, investment records, property transfers. A paper trail that painted a picture of systematic theft spanning several years. "Julian has been siphoning money from accounts he managed for my family's trust," Nessa explained. "Small amounts at first, but growing bolder over time. We estimate he's stolen nearly $200,000 over the past 3 years." I studied the documents, recognizing some of the account numbers from the papers I'd distributed at the party. "This is what you found after Saturday night?" "This is what we found when we started looking," Patterson corrected. "Your presentation motivated us to examine Julian's activities more closely." "And Tessa?" I asked. "Your wife was aware of at least some of Julian's activities," Wells said. "We have evidence that she helped him move money through accounts at her firm. Whether she knew it was stolen?" He shrugged. "That's for the prosecutors to determine." Nessa leaned forward. "Cole, I want Julian to pay for what he's done. Not just the adultery, but the theft, the betrayal of trust, the years of lies." Her voice hardened. "I want him destroyed." "What does that have to do with me?" "You have access to information we need. The secret phone, the recordings, the financial documents you gathered. With your cooperation, we can build a case that will send Julian to prison and destroy any credibility your wife might have left." David cleared his throat. "What exactly are you asking my client to do?" "Testify," Patterson said simply. "Tell the truth about how he discovered the affair, what evidence he found, what he observed. All perfectly legal, all completely factual." "And in return?" I asked. Nessa smiled, and for the first time since I'd known her, it seemed genuine. "Julian will lose his law license permanently. He'll face criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. Your wife's firm will terminate her to avoid association with the scandal." She paused. "And you'll have the satisfaction of knowing they got exactly what they deserved." I looked at the documents spread across the table. Evidence of crimes that went far beyond adultery, that turned Julian from a cheating husband into a common thief. "There's something else," Nessa said quietly. "Something personal I think you should know." She pulled out a different folder, this one thinner, but somehow more ominous. "Julian's been planning this for over a year," she said. "The affair with your wife was just the beginning. He intended to divorce me, marry Tessa, and use the settlement money to start a new life somewhere else." "That's not unusual in divorce cases," David said. "No, but this is." Nessa opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Julian took out a life insurance policy on me 6 months ago. $2 million, with him as the sole beneficiary." The room went silent. Even the attorneys seemed uncomfortable with the implication. "You think he was planning to—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "I think Julian is capable of anything when it comes to money," Nessa said. "And I think your wife was naive enough to believe whatever story he told her about their future together." I thought about the messages I'd read, the casual way Julian and Tessa had discussed destroying their spouses' lives. Had they been planning something worse than divorce? Something permanent? "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Help me make sure Julian never has the opportunity to hurt anyone again," Nessa replied. "Help me make sure your wife understands the consequences of her choices." David touched my arm. "Cole, can we have a moment to discuss this privately?" "No need," I said, still staring at the insurance policy. "I'll do it." "Cole, I'll testify. I'll provide whatever evidence you need. I'll help you destroy them both." I looked up at Nessa. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "Emma stays out of this completely. No testimony, no depositions, no involvement whatsoever." "Agreed." "And when this is over, when Julian's in prison and Tessa's career is finished, I want to be left alone. No more family gatherings, no more obligations, no more pretending we're all one big happy family." Nessa nodded. I think we can both agree that the family dynamic has changed permanently. Patterson was taking notes. We'll need you to sign a cooperation agreement. And we'll want to depose you formally. Get your testimony on record. When? As soon as possible. The district attorney is very interested in this case, especially the financial crimes. White-collar crime involving trust funds tends to get attention. Wells gathered the documents. Mr. Merrick, I should warn you that this process could take months. Julian will fight the charges, and your wife will likely be called as a witness. It's going to be messy. Messier than Saturday night? Much messier. I thought about that. Months of legal proceedings, depositions, testimony, months of having my private life dissected in court, of having every detail of my marriage examined by strangers. Good, I said finally. Let them see exactly what kind of people they are. After the meeting, David and I sat in his car in the parking lot, neither of us speaking for several minutes. You realize what you just agreed to? He said finally. I agreed to tell the truth. You agreed to help Nessa Halvor destroy your wife and her lover. There's a difference. Is there? I looked at the law firm's imposing facade. David, they weren't just cheating. They were planning to take everything I'd worked for and leave me with nothing. Julian was stealing from his own wife, maybe planning something worse. Tessa was helping him launder money through her firm. We don't know that for certain. We will. And when we do, I want to be on the right side of it. David started the car. Cole, I've been practicing law for 15 years. I've seen a lot of divorces, a lot of betrayals, a lot of people who wanted revenge. But this, he shook his head. This is going to follow you for the rest of your life. So was staying married to a woman who thought I was too stupid to notice her affair. We drove in silence for a while, through neighborhoods where I'd worked, past houses where I'd installed custom cabinets and built entertainment centers and repaired broken furniture. My life's work, scattered across a town that was about to become very uncomfortable for several people. There's something else you should know, David said as we pulled into my driveway. Tessa's attorney called this morning. She wants to negotiate a settlement. What kind of settlement? The usual, division of assets, spousal support, custody arrangements for Emma. David handed me a business card. Her lawyer wants to meet this week. I looked at the card. Margaret Thompson, Family Law. I'd heard the name before. She had a reputation for being aggressive, expensive, and very good at protecting her clients' interests. She's trying to get ahead of the criminal charges, I said. Probably. If Tessa can settle the divorce quickly and quietly, she might be able to minimize the damage to her career. What do you think? David was quiet for a moment. I think Tessa's about to discover that her choices have consequences she didn't anticipate. And I think you're about to find out whether revenge really is as satisfying as people say it is. That evening, I sat in my kitchen and tried to imagine what my life would look like in 6 months. Julian in prison, Tessa's career destroyed, my marriage officially over, Emma heading to college, leaving me alone in a house full of memories I'd rather forget. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the end of everything I'd thought I wanted. My phone rang. Emma's number. Dad, I'm at Sarah's house. Can I stay here tonight? Everything okay? Mom's been calling me all day. She wants me to meet her somewhere, talk about the family situation. Emma's voice was tired. I'm not ready for that conversation. You don't have to have it until you're ready. I know. But Dad? She's really upset, like crying and desperate upset. Part of me feels bad for her. I understood. Despite everything Tessa had done, Emma still loved her mother. That love was going to complicate everything that came next. Emma, your mother made choices, adult choices with adult consequences. You don't have to fix that for her. I know, but it's hard watching everything fall apart. Yeah, I said. It is. After Emma hung up, I walked through the house Tessa and I had shared for 15 years. Every room held memories, some good, some bad, most just ordinary moments that had seemed important at the time. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of destroying the woman I'd once loved and the man I'd once called family. I would help send Julian to prison and end Tessa's career. I would have my revenge, complete and devastating. But tonight, sitting alone in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet, I wondered if winning was going to feel as empty as losing had. The district attorney's office occupied the entire 4th floor of the courthouse, a building I'd walked past thousands of times but never entered. The hallways smelled like old coffee and older secrets, lined with photographs of prosecutors who'd built careers on other people's mistakes. Assistant District Attorney Sarah Mitchell was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made me understand why Julian was in trouble. She'd been building white-collar crime cases for 10 years, according to David, and had a reputation for being thorough, relentless, and very good at explaining complex financial crimes to juries. "Mr. Merrick," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, "thank you for coming in. I know this situation is difficult for you personally. I want Julian Kepler to pay for what he's done." "Good, because what he's done goes far beyond adultery." She opened a thick file. "We've been investigating Julian's financial activities for the past 2 weeks. What we've found is systematic theft, spanning 4 years, involving multiple accounts and at least 6 different victims." 6. Julian managed trust funds for several elderly clients, small amounts at first, a few hundred here, 1,000 there, money that wouldn't be missed immediately. Mitchell pulled out a chart showing financial transfers over time. But he got bolder and greedier. The chart told a story of escalating theft. What had started as minor embezzlement had grown into a sophisticated scheme involving shell companies, false investment reports, and forged documents. "The total amount stolen is approaching $500,000, Mitchell continued. "That's a federal crime, Mr. Merrick. Julian's looking at 10 to 15 years in prison. And my wife? That depends on what she knew and when she knew it." Mitchell pulled out another folder. "We have evidence that Tessa helped Julian move money through accounts at her firm. Whether she understood the money was stolen..." She shrugged. "That's what we need to determine." David leaned forward. "What exactly do you need from my client?" "Everything. The timeline of how he discovered the affair, the evidence he gathered, the financial documents he found. We need to establish how Julian was using the affair to cover his theft, and whether Tessa was complicit or just naive." Mitchell activated a recording device. "Let's start from the beginning, Mr. Merrick. When did you first suspect your wife was having an affair?" I walked them through the entire story. The overheard conversation, the secret phone, the messages between Julian and Tessa, the financial documents I'd found, the recordings I'd made, the confrontation at Nessa's party. "You said Julian referenced using his wife's inheritance," Mitchell said. "Can you be more specific about those conversations?" I pulled out transcripts I'd made from the secret phone. "Here, Julian tells Tessa, 'Don't worry about the hotel bills. Nessa's trust fund covers everything.' And here, where he says, 'She'll never notice a few thousand missing. The old lady has more money than she knows what to do with.' The old lady being Nessa. Julian always called her that when he thought no one was listening, even though she's only 2 years older than he is." Mitchell made notes. "What about the offshore accounts?" "Julian mentioned them several times, said he was setting up their future, making sure they'd have money when they left their spouses." I found another transcript. "Here. He tells Tessa, 'I've been moving money for months. By the time anyone notices, we'll be long gone.' Did your wife ever express concern about where the money was coming from?" I thought about that. "Once. She asked if it was legal, what he was doing. Julian told her it was his money, that he was just moving it to protect it from Nessa in the divorce." "And she believed him?" She wanted to believe him. There's a difference. We spent 3 hours going through every detail, every document, every recorded conversation. Mitchell was thorough, asking follow-up questions that revealed the full scope of Julian's crimes and Tessa's involvement. "One more thing," she said as we prepared to leave. "We're going to need you to testify before the grand jury, probably next week." "What should I expect?" 24 citizens asking you to tell the truth about what you discovered. No cross-examination, no defense attorney trying to trip you up, just your story, in your own words. David gathered his papers. "How strong is the case?" "Against Julian? Ironclad. We have bank records, forged documents, witness testimony. He's going to prison." Mitchell looked at me. "Against your wife? That depends on how convincing she is when she claims she didn't know the money was stolen." "You think she knew?" "I think she's smarter than Julian gives her credit for. And I think smart people ask questions when their lover suddenly has access to large amounts of untraceable cash." That afternoon, I met with Tessa's attorney at her office downtown. Margaret Thompson was everything I'd expected. Expensive suit, aggressive handshake, the kind of confidence that came from winning cases other lawyers wouldn't take. "Mr. Merrick," she said, "I think we can resolve this divorce quickly and amicably, without dragging either party through unnecessary litigation." "What did you have in mind?" She slid a document across the table. "A settlement agreement. Your wife keeps her retirement accounts and half the house value. You keep your business and tools. Joint custody of Emma, no spousal support either direction." I scanned the document. It was generous, probably more than I could expect if we went to court. Too generous. "What's the catch?" "No catch. My client simply wants to move forward with her life." "Her life as a potential criminal defendant?" Thompson's smile tightened. "The district attorney's investigation is ongoing. No charges have been filed. Yet. Mr. Merrick, I'll be direct. If you sign this agreement, if you settle the divorce quietly, it might help both you and your wife avoid additional complications." David, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. "Are you suggesting my client has something to hide?" "I'm suggesting that public testimony in a criminal trial can be unpredictable. Things get said, implications get made. Sometimes innocent people get caught in the crossfire." I understood the threat. Sign the settlement, keep quiet about what I knew, and maybe the prosecutors would go easy on Tessa. Refuse, and she'd make sure I got dragged through the mud alongside Julian. "I'll need time to consider this," I said. "Of course, but I should mention that this offer expires Friday. After that," Thompson shrugged, "my client's options become more limited." Outside Thompson's office, David and I stood on the sidewalk and watched the evening traffic. Normal people heading home to normal lives, unaware that their quiet town was about to be rocked by a scandal that would make national news. "She's scared," David said. "Thompson? Tessa. The settlement offer is too good, too clean. She's trying to buy your silence before the criminal case goes public." "Will it work?" David looked at me seriously. "That depends. How badly do you want your revenge?" I thought about that question as I drove home. The road unspooled beneath the headlights in a familiar blur, every stoplight and turn feeling strangely unreal, as if I were watching someone else make the drive. The dashboard clock glowed an indifferent blue. My hands stayed steady on the wheel while my thoughts spiraled, circling the same raw center again and again. Revenge had a taste to it, sharp, metallic, tempting, and I tested it in my mind, measuring how far it could go before it poisoned everything else. My reputation, Emma's future, the quiet, hard-earned normalcy we still had left. Each possibility landed with its own weight, each one asking what kind of man I was willing to become. Badly enough to destroy the mother of my child? The question followed me into the driveway, lingered as I cut the engine, echoed in the silence that rushed in when the car door closed. Emma was waiting in the kitchen when I got home, homework spread across the table, looking more like Tessa than I'd ever noticed before. The sight of her stopped me short. The same tilt of the head, the same concentrated crease between her brows as she worked through a problem, the same unconscious habit of twirling a pencil between her fingers. The overhead light cast a warm pool across the table, trapping the ordinariness of the moment. Textbooks, half-empty water glass, the faint smell of dinner still in the air. It felt wrong that life could look this normal. "How did it go?" she asked. "Complicated." The word felt thin, inadequate, but it was all I had. "Mom called again. She wants to see you." "What did you tell her?" "That you weren't available, but Dad—" Emma set down her pencil. She sounded really scared, like genuinely terrified. Her voice softened on the last words, concern breaking through the guarded tone she'd been using all week. She should be. The certainty in my own voice surprised me. "Are you going to see her?" I sat down across from my daughter, looking at homework that seemed impossibly normal given everything that was happening around us. A math problem stared up at me, neat and solvable, governed by rules that actually worked. I folded my hands together to keep from reaching for hers, unsure whether I was the one offering reassurance or needing it. "Do you want me to?" Emma was quiet for a long time. "I want to understand why she did it. Why she threw away our family for Uncle Julian. Why she thought we weren't enough." She didn't look at me when she said it. Her eyes stayed on the table, as if the words were too fragile to survive being seen. Those are good questions. They were questions I'd been asking myself too, in darker, angrier forms. "Will you ask her for me?" I looked at my 17-year-old daughter, trying to make sense of adult choices that had shattered her world. She deserved answers, even if they weren't the ones she wanted to hear. She deserved truth that didn't flinch, explanations that didn't lie to make things easier. I hated that this was part of what growing up meant for her now. "Yeah," I said. "I'll ask her." That night, I called the Marriott and asked for room 412. The phone felt heavy in my hand, the decision final the moment the line connected. "Cole?" Tessa's voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying for days. The sound of her name on her lips stirred memories I hadn't invited. Shared jokes, late-night conversations, the easy intimacy we used to have. I shut them down. "We need to talk." "Yes, please. Can you come here? I don't think I should be seen in public right now." There was fear there, naked and unguarded, and something else too. Relief, maybe, that I hadn't refused outright. "1 hour," I said, and hung up. I didn't wait for a response. The Marriott was the nicest hotel in town, the kind of place where business travelers stayed and wedding receptions were held. I'd never had reason to visit before, but I knew Tessa would have chosen it for its discretion and its distance from our neighborhood. The lobby smelled faintly of polished wood and money. Soft music played from hidden speakers, smoothing over the edges of everything. I passed through it like a ghost, unnoticed, grateful for the anonymity. Room 412 was on the 4th floor, overlooking the parking lot where Julian's BMW had sat the night I'd followed them to their first hotel. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same stretch of asphalt, the same indifferent lines marking spaces where lives intersected and unraveled without ceremony. Tessa answered the door looking like she'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red from crying. She hesitated when she saw me, as if unsure whether I was real, then stepped back quickly, making room. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let me enter. The room was a mess, clothes everywhere, empty room service trays, legal documents scattered across the bed. The kind of chaos that came from a life falling apart in real time. The curtains were half drawn, muting the light, and the air felt stale, overused. It looked less like a place to stay and more like a place to hide. "Emma has questions," I said without preamble. "What kind of questions? Why you did it? Why we weren't enough? Why you chose Julian over your own family?" I watched each word land, saw her flinch as if they were physical blows. Tessa sat heavily on the edge of the bed. I don't know how to answer that. Her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her. Try. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Her fingers twisted together, knuckles whitening, as though she could wring a different past out of them if she tried hard enough. I felt invisible. In my own life. In my own marriage. You had your business, your projects, your sense of purpose. Emma had school, friends, her whole future ahead of her. And I had… She gestured helplessly. What did I have? A successful career, a family who loved you, a life most people would envy. The words came out flat, recited like facts from a brochure. A life that felt like it was happening to someone else. Tessa looked up at me. When Julian started paying attention to me, really seeing me, it felt like I was waking up after years of sleepwalking. So you decided to destroy everything we'd built together. I decided to choose myself for once. I looked around the hotel room at the evidence of how well that choice was working out for her. The mess answered for me. Emma thinks you threw away our family for Julian. But that's not really what happened, is it? What do you mean? You threw away our family for the idea of Julian, for the fantasy of being someone different, someone more important, someone who mattered. I sat down in the room's only chair. The problem is, Julian was using you, just like he was using everyone else. Tessa's face crumpled. I know that now. Do you? Because your attorney seems to think you can still salvage this. Sign a settlement, keep quiet about Julian's crimes, maybe avoid prison. Prison? The word came out as a whisper. It barely made it into the air. You helped him launder stolen money, Tessa. $500,000, taken from trust funds and elderly clients. The FBI is involved now. She started crying then, deep sobs that shook her entire body. I watched without sympathy, thinking about Emma's questions and the answers I'd have to give her. This was the cost, I thought. This was what choosing yourself looked like when the fantasy collapsed. I didn't know, she said between sobs. I swear, Cole, I didn't know the money was stolen. But you knew it wasn't his. He said he was protecting assets from the divorce. He said Nessa would try to take everything if she found out about us. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. The honesty of that admission landed harder than any excuse. We sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the sound of traffic outside and the hum of the hotel's air conditioning. Two people who'd shared a life for 23 years, now strangers in a room that smelled like desperation and failed dreams. The noise from outside felt distant, as if the world were continuing without us, unconcerned. What happens now? She asked finally. You face the consequences of your choices, just like everyone else. And us? Our marriage? I thought about the settlement offer, about Thompson's threats, about the grand jury testimony that would make our private pain public knowledge. I thought about Emma at the kitchen table, pencil paused in her hand, waiting for answers. There is no us, Tessa. There hasn't been for a long time. I stood to leave, but she grabbed my arm. Her grip was desperate, fingers digging in like I was something solid she could still hold on to. Please, she said, don't let them destroy me completely. I made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but I'm still Emma's mother. I'm still the woman you loved for 23 years. I looked down at her hand on my arm, remembering when that touch had meant comfort and connection and home. No, I said, pulling free. You're not. I left her crying in that hotel room and drove home to tell my daughter that some questions don't have good answers, only true ones. The grand jury testimony was scheduled for Thursday morning. The grand jury room was smaller than I'd expected, filled with 24 ordinary citizens, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Teachers, retirees, shop owners, office workers, people whose lives were about to intersect with mine in ways none of us had chosen. Assistant District Attorney Mitchell walked me through my testimony methodically. The discovery of the affair, the evidence I'd gathered, the financial crimes I'd uncovered. The jurors listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed they understood the scope of what Julian had done. "Mr. Merrick," one juror asked, "did your wife ever express concern about participating in these financial transactions?" "Once," I replied. "She asked Julian if what he was doing was legal. He assured her it was his money to move." "And she accepted that explanation?" "She wanted to accept it." Another juror raised her hand. "In your opinion, did Mrs. Merrick understand that the money came from theft?" Mitchell started to object, but I answered anyway. "My wife is a successful architect. She manages million-dollar construction budgets, oversees complex financial transactions. She's not naive about money." I paused. She knew enough to ask questions. She chose not to ask too many. The grand jury deliberated for 45 minutes. When they returned, the foreman announced their decision: true bills on all charges against Julian Kepler, including embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering. True bills on conspiracy and money laundering charges against Tessa Relin. Julian was arrested that afternoon at his temporary apartment across town. Tessa was arrested at the Marriott, led away in handcuffs while news cameras rolled. By evening, the story was the lead item on every local news broadcast and had been picked up by regional outlets. "Prominent local attorney and architect charged in embezzlement scheme," read the headline in the next morning's paper. The article included details about the affair, the stolen money, and the dramatic confrontation at Nessa's party. My name was mentioned as the husband who uncovered the scheme, but most of the focus was on Julian and Tessa's spectacular fall from grace. Emma read the article over breakfast, her face carefully neutral. "Are you okay with this?" she asked. "Are you?" She folded the paper and set it aside. "I'm proud of you for telling the truth, but I'm sad that the truth had to be so ugly." "Yeah, me too." That afternoon, Margaret Thompson called to inform me that the settlement offer was withdrawn. Tessa would be fighting the criminal charges, which meant our divorce would have to wait until after the trial. "How long?" I asked David. 6 months, maybe 8. These cases take time to prepare. "And in the meantime?" "You wait. You rebuild your life. You help your daughter get ready for college." Emma had been accepted to 3 universities, including her first choice. The scandal hadn't affected her applications. If anything, the admissions counselors seemed impressed by how she'd handled the situation. "Mature beyond her years," one letter said, "demonstrates resilience and character under difficult circumstances." Spring turned to summer. Julian's trial was scheduled for September, Tessa's for October. The legal machinery ground forward slowly, depositions and motions and plea negotiations that went nowhere because neither defendant was willing to admit the full extent of their crimes. Julian hired the most expensive defense attorney in the state, a man who specialized in white-collar crime and had a reputation for getting lenient sentences for wealthy clients. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Julian's arrogance had left a paper trail that even a skilled attorney couldn't explain away. Tessa's defense was more sympathetic, the naive wife manipulated by her lover, the woman who'd made bad choices but wasn't truly criminal. Her attorney painted her as another victim of Julian's schemes, someone who'd been used and discarded when the plot unraveled. I testified at both trials, telling the same story I'd told the grand jury: the discovery, the evidence, the confrontation. The defense attorneys tried to paint me as a vindictive husband seeking revenge, but the financial records spoke for themselves. Julian was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. He showed no emotion when the verdict was read, but his mother collapsed in the gallery and had to be helped from the courtroom. Tessa was convicted on the conspiracy charge, but acquitted on the more serious money laundering counts. The jury believed she'd been manipulated by Julian, but they also believed she'd known enough to be criminally responsible for her actions. She was sentenced to 18 months in minimum security prison, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. She cried when the sentence was announced. Not the desperate sobs I'd witnessed in the hotel room, but quiet tears that seemed to acknowledge the full weight of what she'd lost. Emma attended both sentencings, sitting beside me in the gallery and watching her mother's world collapse in real time. Afterward, she asked if she could visit Tessa before she reported to prison. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I need to say goodbye to the mother I thought I had." The visit was private, just Emma and Tessa in a small room at the courthouse. I waited in the hallway, watching lawyers and defendants and families navigate the machinery of justice that had consumed our lives for the past year. Emma emerged after 30 minutes, her eyes red, but her expression calm. "What did you say to her?" I asked as we walked to the parking lot. "That I forgave her for being human, but not for being cruel." "And what did she say?" "That she was sorry, that she'd made choices she couldn't take back, that she hoped someday I'd understand why she did what she did." "Do you understand?" Emma was quiet until we reached the car. "I understand that she was unhappy. I understand that she felt trapped. I understand that Julian offered her something she thought she wanted." She buckled her seatbelt and looked at me. "But I also understand that none of that justifies what she did to us." "No, it doesn't." "Dad, are we going to be okay?" I started the car and pulled out of the courthouse parking lot, leaving behind a building where I'd spent too many hours over the past year. Emma was leaving for college in 2 weeks. I'd be alone in the house for the first time in 23 years. "Yeah," I said. "We're going to be fine." 6 months later, Tessa called me. It was the first time we'd spoken since the trials ended. "Cole, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For having the courage to tell the truth, for helping me see who Julian really was before it was too late." "How are you doing?" "Better. The divorce is final, I've recovered most of the stolen money, and I'm learning to live alone for the first time in my life." She paused. "It's not as frightening as I thought it would be." "Good. There's something else. Tessa's being released next month. I thought you should know." I'd been expecting this call. Tessa had served 10 months of her sentence, earning early release for good behavior and participation in prison education programs. "Is she coming back here?" "I don't think so. She's been accepted into a graduate program in California. Architecture history, I believe. A chance to start over somewhere no one knows her story. That's probably for the best." "Cole?" Nessa's voice was softer now. "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For years of treating you like you didn't belong in our family, for making you feel less than, for not seeing that you were the only one among us with any real integrity." "Tessa, let me finish. You were right to expose them. You were right to demand justice. And you were right to refuse to let them make you the fool in their story." After she hung up, I sat in my garage and thought about the past year. Julian in prison, Tessa starting over in California, Emma thriving at college, Tessa learning to live alone. All of us scattered by the choices made in hotel rooms and secret phone calls and moments when people decided that what they wanted mattered more than who they might hurt. I'd gotten my revenge, complete, devastating, exactly what I'd planned that night when I discovered the secret phone. Julian's career destroyed, his reputation ruined, his freedom taken away. Tessa's life upended, her marriage ended, her daughter's trust shattered. But sitting there, surrounded by the tools and projects that had always been my refuge, I realized something I hadn't expected. Revenge wasn't satisfaction. It wasn't closure. It wasn't the sweet victory I'd imagined when I'd rented that projector and planned my dramatic confrontation. Revenge was just the truth, finally spoken aloud. And the truth, it turned out, was enough. Emma came home for spring break, bringing laundry and stories about college life and plans for summer internships. She looked older, more confident, like someone who'd survived something difficult and discovered she was stronger than she'd known. "Any word from Mom?" she asked over dinner. "She's doing well, from what I hear. The graduate program is going well." "Good. I'm glad she found something that makes her happy." "Do you miss her?" Emma considered the question seriously. "I miss the mother I thought I had, but I don't miss the lies or the drama or the feeling that our family was built on secrets." "No regrets about how everything turned out?" "Just one." "What's that?" Emma smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the little girl who used to help me in the garage, asking endless questions about how things worked. I wish I could have seen Uncle Julian's face when that video started playing on Aunt Nessa's wall. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. "Yeah," I said. "That would have been something to see." Outside, spring was turning the world green again. New beginnings, like the party invitation had promised. Just not the kind anyone had expected. And in the end, that was enough.